was it really just an accident?
A 12-year-old child standing trial for the murder of his own sister. But what really happened that night?
Picture a courtroom in New York City, March 2025, where silence feels like a scream. The room is packed. Reporters, onlookers, their eyes locked on a boy who looks too small for the chair he's in. Jacob Carter, just 12 years old, sits with his head bowed, his hands folded tightly in his lap. His dark hair falls over his eyes, hiding whatever he's feeling. The charge against him is unthinkable: murder. His 8-year-old sister, Emma, shot dead in their own home, and the gun was in Jacob's hands. The judge's voice cuts through the tension, reading the accusation like a death sentence. Jacob doesn't look up, not even when his mother's sobs echo from the back of the room. The city's holding its breath, waiting for answers. How does a child become a killer? Or is there something we're not seeing? Let's step back to a cold February night when the Carter family's perfect world shattered like glass. The Carters lived in a townhouse on the Upper East Side, the kind of place that screamed money. Marble floors, chandeliers that caught the light like diamonds. Vincent Carter, Jacob's father, was a titan in the business world, a man who shook hands with senators and smiled for the cameras. His wife, Laura, was quiet, elegant, the kind of woman who kept the family's secrets locked tight. Jacob and Emma were their pride. Jacob, the serious one, always reading, always thinking. Emma, the light of the house, her laughter filling every room. That night, February 12th, 2025, the house was quiet. Laura was at a charity gala, Vincent in his study, his phone buzzing with late-night calls. Jacob and Emma were upstairs, playing in their shared game room. No one heard the shot until it was too late. Laura came home at 10:37 p.m., her heels clicking on the marble. She called for the kids, expecting giggles or the hum of a video game. Instead, she found Jacob on the floor, his face pale, his hands shaking. Emma lay beside him, a small, still figure, blood pooling under her. A pistol, sleek and black, sat inches away. Laura screamed, a sound that tore through the house. Vincent rushed in, his phone dropping from his hand. "What did you do?" he shouted, grabbing Jacob's shoulders. The boy didn't answer, his eyes fixed on Emma, wide and unblinking. The police arrived within minutes, their sirens cutting through the night. They found Jacob silent, the gun's grip smeared with his fingerprints. He didn't cry, didn't speak, just stared as they cuffed him. By morning, the story was everywhere. Boy, 12, kills sister in shocking tragedy. The headlines didn't hold back, painting Jacob as a troubled kid, a ticking bomb. Vincent stood in front of the press, his jaw tight, his voice steady. "My son is not a murderer," he said. This was an accident. But the evidence was brutal. Jacob's fingerprints, the gun registered to no one, the bullet that matched it perfectly. The police questioned him for hours, but Jacob said nothing, his silence louder than any confession. Laura was a ghost, her face hollow as she sat by Vincent's side, clutching a photo of Emma. The city wanted answers, but all they had was a boy who wouldn't talk and a gun that shouldn't have been there. Clara Hansen was watching from the sidelines. A private detective with a reputation for digging where others wouldn't, she'd been hired by a family friend to look into the case. Clara was 40, sharp-eyed, with a knack for seeing through lies. She didn't buy the story the headlines were selling. A 12-year-old doesn't just find a gun and pull the trigger, not without a reason. She sat in her office, a cramped space in Brooklyn, poring over the police report. The gun was a Beretta, clean, no serial number. It wasn't Vincent's, or so he claimed. Clara's gut told her he was lying. She'd seen men like Vincent before, powerful, polished, with secrets buried deep. She called a contact at the precinct, a cop who owed her a favor. "Where'd that gun come from?" His voice was low, cautious. "No record, Clara. It's like it fell from the sky." That night, Clara slipped into the Carter townhouse, using a key from the family friend. The house was dark, the air heavy with grief. She moved silently, her flashlight sweeping the game room. The blood was gone, cleaned by professionals, but the room felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. She found a loose floorboard under the rug, prying it open to reveal a small metal box. Inside was a single bullet, same caliber as the one that killed Emma. Clara's heart raced. Why hide a bullet? She pocketed it, but a noise stopped her. A creak from downstairs. She froze, her hand on her knife. The house was supposed to be empty. She crept to the stairs, peering into the dark. A shadow moved in Vincent's study, the glint of a phone screen. Someone was there, searching. Back at the precinct, the case was heating up. The prosecutor was pushing for a trial, calling Jacob a danger to society. Vincent hired the best lawyers, their suits as sharp as their arguments. But Clara wasn't watching the courtroom. She was following Vincent. He'd been seen leaving his office late, meeting men in suits at a warehouse in the Bronx. Clara tailed him one night, her car hidden in the shadows. The warehouse was old, its windows boarded up. Vincent stepped out of his Bentley, shaking hands with a man whose face was hidden by a cap. Clara snapped a photo, her camera's click drowned by the city's hum. The man handed Vincent a briefcase, and she caught a glimpse inside. Stacks of cash, and something else. Something metallic. Jacob sat in juvie, his silence unbroken. Clara visited him, her eyes soft but searching. "Tell me what happened, kid." She looked at her, his face a mask. "It was an accident," he whispered, his first words in days. Clara leaned closer. "Where'd you get the gun, Jacob?" He shook his head, his eyes darting to the door. "It was just there." Clara didn't push, but she knew he was scared. Of what? Or who? That night, her phone buzzed with an anonymous text. "Leave the Carters alone." She stared at the screen, the warehouse photo still open on her laptop. Vincent was hiding something, and it was bigger than a gun. The city was watching, and someone wanted Clara to stop looking. But she was just getting started. The city was closing in on Jacob Carter, a 12-year-old boy with a murder charge hanging over him like a storm cloud. It was late February 2025, and New York's Upper East Side was buzzing with whispers about the Carter family tragedy. Jacob had shot his 8-year-old sister Emma in their pristine townhouse, or so the police said. His fingerprints were on the gun, a Beretta with no serial number, and his silence in the interrogation room was deafening. Vincent Carter, his father, stood tall in front of the cameras, swearing it was an accident. But the headlines didn't care. Killer kid or tragic mistake, they screamed, tearing the family apart. Clara Hansen, the private detective hired to dig into the case, wasn't buying the story. A hidden bullet in the game room, a shadowy figure in Vincent's study, and a briefcase full of cash at a Bronx warehouse? Something was rotten, and she was determined to find it. Clara sat in her Brooklyn office, the bullet from the Carter house glinting under her desk lamp. It was the same caliber as the one that killed Emma, tucked away under a floorboard like a dirty secret. Why hide it? She'd tailed Vincent to that warehouse, seen him with a man in a cap, the briefcase changing hands. The metallic glint inside wasn't money. It was a gun, just like the one that killed Emma. Clara's mind raced. Vincent was a businessman, a pillar of the community, but pillars could crack. She pulled up his financials, courtesy of a hacker friend who owed her one. The numbers didn't add up. Offshore accounts, cash deposits, payments to shell companies with names like Vortex Holdings. Clara's gut twisted. Vincent wasn't just rich, he was dirty. She drove to the juvenile detention center where Jacob was being held. The kid looked smaller than before, his eyes hollow, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his shirt. Clara sat across from him, her voice soft but firm. "Jacob, I found a bullet in your game room, same as the one that, talk to me." He looked up, his face a mask of fear. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "The gun was just there, in Dad's desk." Clara's heart skipped. Vincent's desk? He told the police he didn't own a gun. Why were you in his study? Jacob's eyes darted to the door like he expected someone to burst in. Clara leaned closer. "What else did you see in there, kid?" Jacob shook his head, his lips sealed tight. "He'll know if I tell." That night, Clara followed another lead. The anonymous text, leave the Carters alone, had come from a burner phone, but her hacker friend traced it to a tower near the warehouse. She parked a block away, the Bronx air thick with diesel and decay. The warehouse loomed, its windows blacked out, a faint hum coming from inside. She slipped through a side door, her flashlight catching rows of crates stacked high. Most were unmarked, but one had a label, Vortex Holdings. Her pulse quickened. She pried it open, finding plastic bags full of cash and a single Beretta, identical to the murder weapon. Before she could move, a shadow shifted behind her. She spun, her knife drawn, but the figure was gone. A clatter echoed from the far end of the warehouse, and she heard footsteps fading fast. Back at the Carter townhouse, Vincent was unraveling. He stood in his study at the phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and sharp. "I told you to clean it up. No loose ends." He didn't notice Laura in the doorway, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Who are you talking to?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Vincent spun, his eyes flashing. "Go to bed, Laura." But she didn't move. "This is about Emma and Jacob. What did you do, Vincent?" He stepped closer, his jaw tight. "You don't want to know." Laura backed away, her eyes filling with tears. She'd seen the locked drawer in his desk, the one he guarded like a vault. She'd never dared open it until now. Clara was back in her office, the warehouse gun locked in her safe. She called her cop contact, pressing for answers. "Vortex Holdings," she said. "It's tied to Vincent. What do you know?" The cop's voice was tense. "Clara, you're poking a hornet's nest. Vortex is a front. Guns, drugs, you name it. Carter's name's been whispered in those circles, but no one's got proof." Clara hung up, her mind racing. Vincent was no saint, but was he a killer? She pulled up the warehouse photo, zooming in on the man in the cap. His face was blurry, but something about his stance felt familiar. She'd seen him before, somewhere. Her phone buzzed. A new text. Another burner. "Check the desk." Clara's blood ran cold. Someone was leading her, but who? Laura waited until Vincent left for a late meeting. She crept into his study, her hands shaking as she jimmied the locked drawer. Inside was a ledger, names, dates, sums in the millions. Vortex Holdings was there, alongside others. Bronx Drop, Clean Batch. Tucked beneath it was a photo of Vincent with a man in a cap, the same one Clara had seen. Laura's breath caught. She heard the front door open. Vincent was back. She stuffed the photo in her pocket and fled upstairs, her heart pounding. Downstairs, Vincent paused, his eyes on the open drawer. He knew someone had been there. New York's shadows were growing longer, and Clara Hansen was running out of places to hide. It was early March 2025, and the Carter case was a fire that wouldn't die. Jacob Carter, 12 years old, sat in juvie, his silence a wall no one could break. He'd shot his little sister Emma with a gun that shouldn't have existed, and the city was ready to bury him for it. His father, Vincent Carter, played the grieving patriarch, swearing it was an accident, but Clara knew better. The bullet she'd found under the floorboard, the warehouse deal with Vortex Holdings, and the flash drive she'd pulled from Vincent's study, it all pointed to a man with blood on his hands. And that voice in the dark whispering her name, "You're too late, Hansen," was a warning she couldn't shake. Someone was watching, and they knew exactly who she was. Clara sat in her Brooklyn office, the flash drive plugged into her laptop. The screen glowed with files, encrypted invoices, coded messages, names of men she didn't recognize. Vortex Holdings was everywhere, tied to cash drops, gun shipments, and something called Project Clean. Her hacker friend had cracked the encryption, but the deeper Clara dug, the worse it got. Vincent's name appeared in emails, linked to a man named Marcus Reed, a fixer for the city's underworld. The photo Laura had found, Vincent with the man in the cap, was Marcus. Clara was sure of it. She'd seen his type before. Smooth, invisible, the kind of man who made problems disappear. But what was Vincent's problem? And why was Emma's death tangled in it? She drove to the juvenile detention center, needing to see Jacob again. The kid was a puzzle, his silence hiding something bigger than fear. He sat across from her, his eyes fixed on the table, his fingers tracing invisible patterns. "Jacob," Clara said, her voice soft but sharp, "you said the gun was in your dad's desk. What else was in there?" He flinched. His eyes darted to the door. "Nothing," he mumbled, but his voice cracked. Clara leaned closer. "I found a flash drive, kid. Vortex Holdings. Your dad's in deep. Help me help you." Jacob's hands stopped moving. "He told me not to touch his stuff. He said it was dangerous." Clara's heart raced. Dangerous how? She pressed, but Jacob clammed up, his face shutting like a vault. That night, Clara told Vincent again. He was at a high-rise in Manhattan, a glass tower that screamed power. She watched from her car, her camera ready. Vincent stepped out, Marcus Reed at his side, the man in the cap from the warehouse. They climbed into a black SUV and Clara followed, keeping her distance. The SUV led her to a dockyard in Staten Island, the air thick with salt and rust. Crates were stacked high, guarded by men with guns tucked under their jackets. Vincent and Marcus disappeared into a small office, the windows fogged with condensation. Clara crept closer, her breath shallow, and peered through a crack. Marcus handed Vincent a folder, his voice low. "The kid's trial starts tomorrow. We need to move the product now." Vincent nodded, his face unreadable. Clara snapped a photo, but her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You're not invisible." She froze, her eyes scanning the dark. A shadow moved near the crates, and she ducked, her heart pounding. Back at the Carter townhouse, Laura was breaking. She hadn't slept since finding the photo in Vincent's desk. The ledger, the names, the money. It was all too much. She sat in Emma's room, clutching her daughter's stuffed bear, the silence suffocating. She'd overheard Vincent on another call, his voice cold. "The boy won't talk. He knows what's at stake." Laura's hand shook. Was he talking about Jacob? She crept back to the study, searching for the ledger again. It was gone, but she found a burner phone hidden in a drawer. The call log showed one number, dialed repeatedly. She dialed it, her breath catching. A man answered, his voice smooth and dangerous. "Mrs. Carter, you're stepping into dangerous waters." The line dead-end. Laura dropped the phone, her eyes wide. Vincent's footsteps echoed downstairs. She hid the phone and fled, but he was already in the doorway, his eyes narrowing. "What are you doing, Laura?" Clara was back at her office, the dockyard photo on her laptop. The folder Marcus had given Vincent was the key. She could feel it. She cross-referenced the flash drive's files with the police report. One name stood out, Project Clean. It wasn't just guns or money, it was a code for something bigger. An email mentioned a clean batch, set for delivery the night Emma died. Clara's stomach twisted. Was the gun part of that batch? She called her cop contact, his voice tense. "Clara, Vortex is tied to a syndicate. Guns, drugs, black money. Vincent's their frontman, but Marcus Reed's the muscle. You're in over your head." Clara hung up, her eyes on the photo. Marcus's face was clearer now, and she remembered where she'd seen him. A bar downtown, years ago, with a man who'd vanished after a deal gone wrong. The trial was starting, and Jacob was crumbling. Clara watched from the courtroom's back row, her heart heavy. The prosecutor painted him as a monster, a boy who snapped. Vincent sat beside Laura, his face a mask of grief, but Clara saw the cracks, his hands clenched, his eyes darting. She slipped out, heading to the dockyard again. The office was empty now, but she found a shred of paper under a desk, scrawled with an address. A storage unit in Queens. She drove there, the city a blur of lights and rain. The storage unit was locked, but Clara picked it open, her flashlight revealing crates of guns, Berettas, just like the one that killed Emma. A noise behind her made her spin, her knife drawn. A man stood there, his face hidden by a cap. "You're persistent, Hanson," he said, his voice chillingly familiar. Marcus Reed. Before she could move, he was gone, his laughter echoing in the dark. Clara's phone buzzed as she sped away, a new text. "The trial's a distraction. Look at Vincent." She gripped the wheel, her mind racing. The flash drive, the guns, Marcus, Vincent. It was all connected, and Jacob was caught in the middle. The boy's silence wasn't fear. It was loyalty. To whom? And why? The storage unit was a gold mine, but Clara was out of time. Someone was always watching, and they were closing in. Vincent's empire was crumbling, and he'd do anything to keep it standing. even if it meant sacrificing his son. The trial of Jacob Carter was a circus, and New York City was eating it up. It was mid-March 2025, and the courtroom was a battlefield of whispers and accusations. A 12-year-old boy, accused of murdering his little sister Emma, sat silent as ever, his eyes fixed on the floor. The gun, a Beretta with no serial number, was the only witness, and its story was damning. Jacob's fingerprints, a single shot, a dead girl. Vincent Carter, his father, played the part of a grieving titan, his tailored suits and steady voice swearing his son's innocence. But Clara Hansen, the private detective digging into the shadows, knew Vincent was no saint. The flash drive from his study, the guns in the Queen's storage unit, the name Marcus Reed, it all pointed to a man neck deep in a dirty game. And that voice in the dark, calling her by name, was a warning. She was getting too close. Clara sat in her Brooklyn office, the flash drive's files open on her laptop. The encrypted emails mentioned Project Clean, a code for gun shipments, cash drops, and something called the Syndicate. Vincent's name was all over it, linked to Marcus Reed, a fixer who made bodies and problems disappear. The storage unit had been a goldmine, crates of Berettas, identical to the one that killed Emma. But Marcus had been there, his laughter echoing as he vanished. Clara's phone buzzed with another anonymous text. "The boy knows. Ask him." Her stomach twisted. Jacob's silence wasn't just fear, it was a lock, and she needed the key. She drove to Juvie, the city's lights blurring past. Jacob looked worse, paler, thinner, his hands trembling. "Jacob," she said, her voice low, "you said the gun was in your dad's desk. What else did you see?" He shook his head, his voice a whisper. "He'll kill me." Clara's heart stopped. "Who, Jacob? Your dad?" The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he said nothing more. Vincent was unraveling, though he hid it well. He stood outside the courtroom, cameras flashing, his voice steady as he told reporters, "My son is innocent. This is a tragedy, not a crime." But behind closed doors, he was a man on edge. Laura had stopped looking at him, her eyes haunted since finding the photo of him with Marcus. She'd hidden the burner phone she'd found in his desk. Its single number burned into her memory. Late that night, she dialed it again, her hands shaking. The same smooth voice answered, "Mrs. Carter, you're testing my patience." Laura's voice cracked. "What does Vincent owe you? Why is my son in jail?" The man laughed, cold and sharp. "Ask your husband about Vortex and stay out of it." The line went dead. Laura clutched Emma's stuffed bear, her mind racing. She knew Vincent's business wasn't clean, but this was a nightmare. Clara wasn't sleeping. She copied the flash drive and sent it to her hacker friend who was still decoding its secrets, but the storage unit haunted her. She drove back to Queens, the rain pounding her windshield. The unit was locked, but the crates were gone. Someone had cleaned it out. She found a single bullet casing in the corner. Same caliber as Emma. Her phone buzzed. A photo from an unknown number showing her at the storage unit the night before. The message read, "Last warning." Clara's blood ran cold. She was being hunted, and Marcus Reed was the hunter. She called her cop contact, his voice tense. "Clara, the Syndicate's bigger than Vincent. Marcus works for someone higher up. You're stirring a pot that'll burn you." She hung up, her eyes on the bullet casing. It wasn't just evidence, it was a message. Laura couldn't stay quiet anymore. She confronted Vincent in his study, the burner phone in her hand. "Who is Marcus Reed?" she demanded, her voice shaking. Vincent's face darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about." She held up the phone. "I called him, Vincent. He knows about Emma, about Jacob. What have you done?" Vincent snatched the phone, his hands trembling. "You're going to ruin us," he hissed. Laura backed away, her eyes on the desk drawer. She'd seen him hide things there before. Papers, cash, things he thought she was too weak to understand. She waited until he left, then broke open the drawer. Inside was a key, etched with an address, a warehouse in the Bronx. Her heart pounded. She slipped the key into her pocket. Knowing she was crossing a line she couldn't uncross. Clara was following her own lead. The flash drive had revealed a name, Daniel Voss, a syndicate boss tied to Vortex Holdings. She tracked him to a bar downtown, a dive where the air smelled of whiskey and secrets. Voss was there, older than she'd expected, his eyes cold as ice. She watched from a corner, her cap pulled low. He was meeting Marcus, their voices low. Carter's slipping. The kid's trial is a problem. Voss leaned forward. Clean it up. No loose ends. Clara's camera caught it all, but as she slipped out, a hand grabbed her arm. Marcus, his grip like steel. "You're a dead woman, Hanson," he whispered, then let her go, vanishing into the crowd. Clara's heart raced, but she had the photos. She sent them to her cop contact, demanding a warrant. The trial was heating up. The prosecutor painted Jacob as a cold-blooded killer, waving the gun's fingerprints like a flag. Vincent's lawyers fought back, but their arguments were thin. Clara watched from the back, her eyes on Vincent. He was too calm now, his hands steady. She knew why. The evidence was disappearing. The crates, the ledger, the flash drive secrets. Someone was wiping the slate clean. That night, Clara broke into Vincent's office at his company's headquarters. The safe was open, as if someone wanted her to find it. Inside was a single document, a contract between Vortex and the Syndicate, signed by Vincent and Voss. It detailed Project Clean, a gun-running operation, with Emma's death listed as collateral. Clara's blood froze. She heard footsteps outside and the lights went out. Nora was at the warehouse, the key trembling in her hand. The door creaked open, revealing crates like the ones Clara had found. She opened one, finding guns, dozens of them. A voice behind her made her spin. "You shouldn't be here, Laura." It was Marcus, his gun drawn. She screamed, but the warehouse swallowed the sound. Clara, meanwhile, was trapped in Vincent's office, the footsteps closing in. Her phone buzzed. One last text. "The boy's the key." She gripped the contract, knowing Jacob's silence was all that stood between Vincent and the truth. The door opened and a shadow loomed. Someone was always one step ahead, and Clara was running out of time. The courtroom was a pressure cooker, and Jacob Carter was at its center. It was late March 2025, and New York City was ready to deliver its verdict. A 12-year-old boy, accused of murdering his sister Emma with a Beretta that shouldn't have been in his hands, sat silent, his eyes hollow. The prosecution called him a monster. His father, Vincent Carter, swore it was an accident. But Clara Hanson, the private detective who'd chased every shadow in this case, knew the truth was darker. The flash drive, the guns, and the Queen's storage unit, the contract tying Vincent to Vortex Holdings and the Syndicate. It all pointed to a man whose empire was built on blood. Marcus Reed, the Syndicate's fixer, was out there, cleaning up loose ends, and Clara was next on his list. The text on her phone, "The boy's the key," burned in her mind. Jacob knew something, and she had to get to him before the Syndicate did. Clara slipped into the juvenile detention center, her heart pounding. The trial was wrapping up, and Jacob's silence was louder than ever. She sat across from him, the contract from Vincent's safe tucked in her jacket. "Jacob," she said, her voice urgent, "you said the gun was in your dad's desk. Why was it there? What did you see?" Jacob's eyes flicked to the door, his hands trembling. He met people," he whispered. "Men came to the house. Late at night. Dad kept the gun for them." Clara's blood ran cold. "Who, Jacob? Marcus Reed?" The boy nodded, tears spilling. "He told me to stay quiet, or they'd hurt Mom." Clara gripped his hand. "You're safe now. Tell me everything." Jacob's voice broke. "I found the gun in the desk. Emma wanted to play. I didn't know it was loaded." Laura was breaking too. She'd escaped the warehouse in the Bronx, Marcus's gun still flashing in her memory. The crates of weapons, the key she'd stolen from Vincent's desk, it was all real, and it was tearing her apart. She sat in Emma's room, the stuffed bear in her lap, and dialed the burner phone again. This time, Marcus answered. "You're a dead woman, Laura," he said, his voice like ice. She didn't flinch. "Tell me why my daughter's dead," she demanded. Marcus laughed. "Ask Vincent about Project Clean. He brought the gun home." The line went dead. Laura's hands shook as she pulled out the photo of Vincent and Marcus. She knew what she had to do. She drove to the precinct, her heart racing, and handed the photo to Clara's cop contact. "Vincent's dirty," she said, her voice trembling. "Save my son." Clara was one step behind. She'd sent the contract to her hacker friend, who'd cracked its final layer. Project Clean wasn't just guns. It was a syndicate operation to flood the city with untraceable weapons, with Vincent as the frontman. Emma's death was listed as unforeseen collateral, a mistake in a shipment meant for Marcus. The gun in the desk was one of theirs, left carelessly loaded. Clara's phone buzzed, a voice message from her contact. "We're raiding the warehouse. Get to the courthouse. Vincent is making a move." She sped through the city, the contract in her hand, her mind on Jacob. The boy's confession was the key, but Vincent was dangerous and Marcus was a ghost. The trial was chaos. The prosecutor was pushing for a conviction, waving Jacob's fingerprints like a trophy. Vincent sat in the front row, his face a mask of grief, but Clara saw the truth in his eyes. Panic. She slipped into the courtroom, her eyes locked on him. Laura was there, pale and trembling, clutching the photo. She nodded to her, a silent promise. The judge called a recess, and Vincent slipped out, his phone pressed to his ear. Clara followed him, her knife hidden in her sleeve. She led him to a back hallway where Marcus waited, his cap pulled low. "The boy's talking," Vincent hissed. Marcus's voice was cold. "Then we end it. Voss wants no loose ends." Clara's heart stopped. Daniel Voss, the syndicate boss, was the puppet master. She snapped a photo, her camera silent, and sent it to her contact. Laura couldn't wait anymore. She burst into the judge's chambers, the photo in her hand. "My husband is a criminal," she said, her voice breaking. "He's with the syndicate. The gun was his." The judge stared stunned as Clara's contact stormed in, the contract and photo in hand. "We've got enough for a warrant," he said. "Vincent is done." Outside, Clara confronted Vincent in the hallway. "It's over," she said, holding up the contract. "You let a loaded gun into your house. Emma's dead because of you." Vincent's face twisted. "You don't understand," he spat. "They'd kill us all." Before Clara could respond, Marcus lunged from the shadows, his gun drawn. Clara dove, tackling Vincent as the shot rang out, grazing her arm. Security swarmed, pinning Marcus to the ground. The raid on the warehouse was a bloodbath. The FBI, tipped by Clara's evidence, found crates of guns, ledgers, and recordings tying Vincent to Voss. Marcus confessed in custody, naming Vincent as the syndicate's front and Voss as the mastermind. The gun that killed Emma was part of a clean batch, meant for a deal the night she died. Vincent had hidden it in his desk, too arrogant to lock it away. Jacob's trial collapsed. His confession, backed by the evidence, proved it was an accident. He was released, but the scars ran deep. Laura took him away from the city, her eyes haunted by Vincent's betrayal. Vincent was arrested, his empire crumbling under the weight of his own greed. Voss vanished, a ghost in the syndicate's machine, but Clara wasn't done hunting. The Carter townhouse stood empty, its chandeliers dark. Jacob's silence had saved him, but it couldn't bring Emma back. Clara stood outside the courthouse, the rain washing away the blood on her arm. The headlines had shifted. "Businessman secrets exposed. Boy cleared." But the city didn't care about justice. It wanted a story. Clara knew the truth was uglier. Vincent's black money, his syndicate ties, his carelessness, it had torn his family apart. She looked at the photo of Vincent and Marcus one last time, then tossed it into a dumpster. The gun was gone, but its echo lingered. Somewhere, Voss was watching, and Clara's fight wasn't over.